All right, for this week's Want to Know Wednesday, DVS left a comment and he asked, can you possibly touch on underwriting / acquisition criteria you and your team look for in deals you buy? I know it probably changes during different market cycles, but if you can touch on the essentials you look for in a deal. Yeah, so I'll talk high level and then maybe I'll try to get more granular with it. Every single Wednesday, 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, we're coming at you with Want to Know Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not done so yet, please hit the subscribe button. We're trying to get those subscribers up. There's a lot of people out there giving me shit because you post all this stuff and you've only got 1,080 followers or subscribers on YouTube. Please be one of the people right now that will subscribe, like the video, and hey, this week's video, we're answering a question from the comments of last week's video. If you want your question to be featured on next week's Want to Know Wednesday, leave a comment that includes your question. Overall, my mindset with acquisitions has changed through the years. So when we were kind of first starting, it was older buildings. They were built 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. We look at those types of products that needed a lot of physical maintenance and cosmetic and siding and roofing and landscaping and cabinets and all that stuff. It needed those improvements. So we were buying those deals, right? And we were successful turning those deals around. And then what happened was during COVID, kind of a light bulb went off in my head, and I think that, other people have told me I was a little bit ahead of the curve. I thought that I was a little bit ahead of the curve. I don't know if I actually was or not, but right when COVID happened, it got really hard to find labor. We had a lot of product delays. And so obviously, getting caught, a couple of our projects got caught up in the middle of that storm where it was really hard for us to get cabinets in. It would take weeks. And so what I started to do before a lot of other people did, and a lot of other people thought I overpaid for some stuff that we bought in early 2021 and mid 2021. But I started to buy newer assets that were less than 20 years old, maybe 15 years old, 8 years old, kind of in that range. And my mindset there was it was still value add, just a different value add. We weren't going to have to buy all the new cabinets, not as much flooring. It was going to be a lot of paint and basically a lot of marketing and just basically pushing rents because we were buying these deals that just weren't being operated by an asset manager and they weren't really paying attention to the market rents, and so the rents had fallen behind. And so we were able to then pick up those deals and we've been able to see a lot of huge upside, right, through inflation, through the increase of rents that happened in the rest of 2020 and in 2021. We were able to do those things from a management standpoint to improve the deal and to improve the property, which when I say property, I mean business, to improve the business without having to go in and deal with the product delivery delays, the labor shortages, and all that stuff. So everything that we have bought since 2020 has essentially been stuff that is less than 20 years old, and we haven't had to do a ton of replacing cabinets. Do we have them come up here and there because it just gets trashed for a reason? Yeah, but we really have just stayed clear of that. Now, is that going to be like that forever? I don't know. We're going to see how long it goes. A lot of the deals we've been buying lately, too, they've been dang near 100% have been townhome style living where maybe they're buildings of 8 or 16, but it's rather low density, and there's grounds, there's private entrance, utilities is paid for all by the tenant, and they're billed directly from the utility provider. So, and we never bought any of that stuff prior to 2020. So we've really got a wide spectrum in what we've invested in over the years and kind of where we're on focus and kind of where we're focused now. And so to go to your question, that I'm sure this ebbs, in your question you said something to the effect of this ebbs and flows depending on the type of market. That's how it's ebbed and flowed for us. Now there's other people obviously that are trying to do what we started doing about 2 or 3 years ago, which is buying that type of product. And so people have come to me and be like, wow, you were way ahead of the curve because I thought you were paying, and is it curb or is it curve? You're way ahead of the curve, right?
Curve.
Yeah, I keep saying curve, whatever. You can keep that in. But so people come to me now like, you were way ahead of the curve because back then I thought you were overpaying for that asset and you got a great deal. So reflecting back on it, 2 years, 3 years later, all these people are looking back on what we bought and they're like, you bought that at a great price. And it's a great thing for a couple of these assets, a great thing that we did because we were not shy of going with the variable rate mortgages, right? And it's a good thing we bought some of those when we did and turned them around, got them locked up, or are still floating them. But they're very desirable, and we've been able to really increase rents 25%, 40%, 50%. Now that's in a combination because rents have gone up so much, but also because the previous owners were still stuck in 2008 to 2012 rental levels, right? The rental amount levels. They hadn't really pushed rents forever. They were just trying to keep 100% occupied because they wanted to go to Florida on the weekends and not have to deal with vacancy, right? Well, that's why we have teams that can go in and do these things so that, it's not just coming down to one, just my family or, whatever, right? We're a little bit bigger of a business than a mom and pop shop. So that kind of lays the foundation and allows me to go into a little bit more of what we and what my team look like as far as or what we look for in acquisition criteria and our underwriting. And so from a standpoint of acquisition criteria, what I'm a big fan of and what I've been talking about a lot, again, over the last 2 years especially, because prior to the last 2 years, there were times where I kind of got locked in on just price per unit, right? But what I've realized is you cannot just look at one criteria. You can't look at just price per unit because you're going to miss a ton of great deals, right? So what all do we look for in acquisition criteria? And then obviously the price that you're willing to pay is a sliding scale, and it's fine-tuned and it slides and gets tuned based on the different answers to the questions. And now those questions are, again, is it townhomes or is it an apartment building? So when you look at acquiring a townhome versus an apartment building, when you have an apartment building, you might have elevators. That's extra costs, right? You're going to have the common area hallways that you got to keep clean. You got to keep them painted. You got to keep, all that stuff, right? So you got to upkeep it. You got to heat it. You got to potentially cool it. You got baseboard trim in there. You got ceiling tiles maybe, or just ceiling. You got drywall. So it's a whole nother maintenance standpoint, right? When you add that component in, you're going to have higher maintenance costs because of that. In apartments, you might be paying water and sewer, right? Because there might be one main line coming into the building where the tenant still pays electric and heat, but you're paying water. So anytime that I'm having to pay more expenses, I'm going to pay less for that building. The townhomes, most of the townhomes, they're being billed by the utility company for the water, for the gas, for the sewer, for the electric, all of it, right? So now over at the townhomes, because I don't, like that sliding scale right there, it's going to slide towards a little bit higher price per unit or total price because that is not on me or on the landowner. Right? So when I look at that, again, it's not necessarily a criteria that this has to be this way, but I have to be aware in my underwriting then. Obviously, you're going to see it if you underwrite the whole deal, right? Because you're going to actually see the expense come out and the expense difference. Where a lot of people go wrong is when they just do the math in their head, which you can do when you get really good at this, from a high level, and they will miss deals because they'll do the math in their head and they'll just look at the total price and the price per unit, but not take into effect if it is an apartment building or if it's a townhome. So we were able to buy some of these townhomes, and people sent these townhomes to me because they're like, we just can't make sense of the numbers. And I look at it and I'm aware, or I find out if I'm not aware, who's paying the water, right? I'm aware of what it costs us to clean the common areas. If we don't have the common areas, that's that much more money that I save that drops to our NOI, which then allows me to pay a higher price. When I'm allowed to pay a higher price because the NOI is higher, then the price per unit is also higher, which if you're only looking at the price per unit, you now miss out on those townhomes. That's something that I look at, right? Who's paying the utilities? I look at what the rents are in the neighborhood. I try to buy things that we're situated in, where our comps, like the last 800 units that we have bought, the rents across the street or in other comparable properties, and when I say comparable, truly comparable, not going and taking a property that is, 60s and comparing it with something that's from 2022, right? Does it have some influence? Sometimes, but I try to find something that's a true comp. So the true comps on the deals that we've been buying have literally had rents that were 30% to 55% higher than the property that we were looking at acquiring, right? And so I love that situation because if I can buy that deal cash flow positive day one, and everywhere else, where else are they going to go if we start to raise their rents? So what we do is we start to close that gap to not cause a huge vacancy for us, but to allow some vacancy so we can get some of those up to market, right? So so these 800, 900 units we've bought this year, if there's a 20 to 40% difference in where the rents are at now compared to the market, what we'll do is we'll increase the rents on our current tenants to 15%. So they're still going to enjoy 15 to 20%. So they're still going to enjoy a discount in relation to picking up and moving. So if they pick up and move, they're going to have moving costs. But also if they pick up and move and go to a similar apartment, they're going to be paying another on top. They're going to be paying 40% more instead of 20% more. Right? So I really try to look, that's part of my criteria. I'm not the guy. There are people out there that are just going to buy the Class A stuff, the flashy Class A stuff, and hey, that's great. You're playing long term. You're still going to win. I'm a cash flow guy, so cash flow is my other criteria, right? And so in order to get my cash flow criteria, the criteria needs to be, hey, I need some rent disparity where I'm buying something that does not have rents pushed to the highest level yet. I'm not someone that's going to go buy, right now, I'm not someone that's going to go buy a Class A building where the rents are already top of the market. It's not something that I'm even remotely interested in at this point in what I'm doing. I want cash flow day one, and I need that disparity so that I can close that gap from where we're at to market and add to the cash flow that we had day one. Take the cash flow from 6 to 10% up to 15 to 20% over 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And that's how we've been able to see huge velocity of our capital and our equity and multiply our equity so much, is because we've been able to get into situations like that. So when I think about other criteria, something else that you got to consider, right? And now I'm talking criteria and I'm talking underwriting. I'm just kind of talking the whole big picture. Another thing you have to consider is some of these townhomes, on the flip side, some of them are very spread out. Some of them are wooded where there's not as much yards and they're spread out. Right? Well, if that's the case, okay, there's maybe not that much lawn to take care of, but maybe there's still a lot of plowing, right? Because the grounds are bigger, whatever. There might be more surface parking because there's not underground parking. I have to be aware of that because my snow removal bill is going to be higher, right? I have to be aware of that because that's going to affect our landscaping, bills as far as true landscaping and improving it. Do we need new mulch? Do we need new rock? And how often do we need that? Is every 2 years? Is every 5 years? Is every 10 years? Right? What type of product is there right now? How long is it going to last? But then I got to know, okay, how much grounds, how many acres do they have to truly mow each time? We've got a property that sits on like 25 acres and it's pretty wooded, right? So if I just say 25 acres and that's all you hear, you think that might have more mowing than a 16-acre property. Well, that's not the case because the 25 acres has a lot of woods, some lawn, right? Whereas the other one that's 17 acres, there's no woods there, it's all lawn. So you have to be able to think about these things. And for me, it was hard to put prices on some of those things when I was first underwriting. But as we've grown, the power of when you grow is you kind of start to really get your own data. And so I have different data sets. Now, sometimes these data sets come from different locations, which again, things in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Madison, Wisconsin are going to be more expensive than something way out in the suburbs or a tertiary market in Wisconsin, right? The cost in New York City to do X is going to cost more than somewhere else. So you need to be aware of all that stuff. But when you start to grow and scale, you start to understand what it costs you to operate the deals the way that you operate them. That creates that secret sauce so that you can go out and have success and execute on your business plan, right? So sometimes when you're first starting, it's hard to underwrite if you don't have someone helping you, if you're not able to learn from the right source because you don't have your own data sets. Now you're just going off the broker. You can't just go off the broker. I'm never going to rip on a broker because I have a lot of great friends that are brokers. They bring us a lot of great deals. They're going to sell our product at some point someday for a lot of money, right? So I'm never going to rip on a broker, but they don't actually operate the deal, right? We're operating the deals. I know what it's going to cost us, and each person's different, right? You might operate the deal different than me. There are people out there that spend less on their snow removal or lawn care than we do, but they don't get as good of a quality product out of it. Maybe they don't get rid of all the ice and they have more slip and falls. Maybe they don't cut the grass as often and it starts to look crappy. To just go by a broker's numbers is not something that I would recommend that you do. It's always good to look at the broker numbers because typically what they're doing is they're taking industry standards, right? But again, those are just standards. Those are just averages. But to execute every single person's individual business plan and where you need to go over the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, which is important, you need to know where you need to go in those years to be able to position the property and to be able to have the right expenditure in the right areas to get it there, because it takes resources to do this right. If I would have not underwrote it correctly or didn't know where I wanted to go, I knew where I wanted to go. You gotta have an idea where you want to go, because that's going to kind of tell you what your expenses are going to be, with how nice you want to make the product, with any changes you want to make to be able to hit that NOI number. The NOI number is so important because on the exit, and now the exit can be two different things, right? It can be a refinance or it can be a sale, but it's going to be based on the net operating income. So you need to know what your net operating income, or have a target of what your net operating income is going to be when you need to refinance in 5 years, or when you need to sell in 10 years, so that you can track towards it. Now, for us to take a net operating income and increase it 20%, that takes resources like people, so we need human capital. That takes resources like putting money back towards appliances, HVAC, potentially technology. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So that's kind of what we look for. I try to look, I start with as big and broad of a outlook as possible on a deal. And then I try to just hone in on, okay, again, one of the first things I'm looking at, townhome or apartment building, right? Who's paying the utilities, right? What's the rent disparity? What are the comparable cap rates in the area? Because ideally, I want to pay, cap rate that's a little bit higher than market, right? If there's other people out there paying a 4%, 5% cap rate, how can I buy it at a 5.25% cap rate? How can I buy it at a 5.85% cap rate? Which now, cap rates brings me to another discussion, right? Or another opinion that I have. So get into cap rates. Cap rates can be when someone buys a deal, you don't actually know what they view the cap rate to be, right? So I'll have brokers that are like, hey, this deal that we're buying right now, congratulations, man, you just paid a 5.6% cap rate for it. But when they don't know how we operate or what we cost, like our books, our thoughts on what we actually paid for it, I might be like, well, really, I paid a 6% cap for this. And if I paid a higher cap, that means I feel like I got a better deal, right? Even cap rates, you have to be aware of that not everything is as advertised. Cap rates and multiples and all that stuff, a lot of it depends on how you operate and what your operating expenses are going to be, what you think the revenues can be, and adjustments that you can make. Deals that I've bought, someone else might look at it and be like, oh, well, that's actually a 5 cap. No, it's a 6. That actually is 6.2 cap. No, that was a 5.8. But that's because they know what it costs for them to operate. I know what it costs for me to operate. You got to be able to have an underwriting plan. You have to be able to have criteria. You have to be able to have all that criteria figured out so that you can come up with the right underwriting plan. And then you have to have the target of where you want to go so that you can operate that plan kind of every step of the way and keep your pulse on it, or keep your finger on the pulse of it, so that you can get there.